everyone and their mother watched The Wolf of Wall Street when it came out.
Mhm.
But how many of those people were aware that it was financed by stolen Malaysian money?
Right.
And then the list goes on and on. Goldman Sachs is involved, international politics, but just the Q rating, if you'll call it that, for what the average American person knows about this was almost zero, despite coverage from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, a best-selling book, and so many people had yet to be held accountable.
Right.
So it just felt like a great story to kind of sink into and grab a hold of and try to tell the truth of it to as many people as possible.
So for people listening that might not know what we're talking about, can we lay this out a little bit for them? Explain who Jolo is.
Yeah, Jolo, birth name Lo Tech Joe, is a Chinese Malaysian businessman, so to speak. He created this thing called 1MDB, which stands for One Malaysia Berhad Development, and it's just a fancy name for a sovereign wealth fund underwritten by the government of Malaysia. And through his personal connections with the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Najib Razak, he was able to come into control of this multi-billion-dollar sovereign wealth fund designed to invest Malaysian taxpayer money into infrastructure projects, the development within the country, investments for the country to accrue interest and investment money from excess funds that the government might have. But unfortunately, unlike the Middle Eastern countries where sovereign wealth funds really first began and took off, where they have unlimited funds, Malaysia wasn't in that boat. So when they created this Malaysian sovereign wealth fund, the government had to accrue a lot of debt to finance it.
Mhm.
And instead of investing this debt money, they stole it and they started to spray it around the world in parties and paying for celebrities to hang out with them and ridiculous luxury goods and so forth. And the scandal stretched on for many years. And the list of things they wasted this money on, it's kind of endless.
Right. So let's talk about that aspect because that's where sort of Americans' ears perk up. So he was paying loads of money, not only in nightclubs to, buy alcohol and do the thing you're supposed to do in a nightclub, but he was paying to be in the company of some of the, hottest celebrities, I guess you would say. And at the time that was Paris Hilton, it was Kim Kardashian, it was Leonardo DiCaprio. And then that turned into funding, it was Jamie Foxx, and then it turned into funding The Wolf of Wall Street, like you said, which is crazy because I still think even though the documentary is out, people don't get that. I think that's such a like crazy thing because that movie is about greed and all like wealth and excess and gluttonous behavior sort of, and that's what his life was. And I think it's incredibly interesting, and I think Americans need to watch it because it's so interesting and spans over things that are not going to make your eyes glaze over. I think when some people hear Malaysian government or funds or corruption in Malaysia, that to them is like too much. It gets a little complicated, but there are so many things that come into our country, and then there's a lot of parallels too, which I want to get into later about Najib and someone like Donald Trump, who's running, and getting himself in some sort of situations and trouble. So I want to ask you, like, when you were thinking about doing this story, I was really curious about how it unfolded to you. So I'm assuming that you thought about doing it and you thought it would be a great story because you were going down one road, and then what you came across, because you got access to some amazing people here.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like peeling an onion, right? Like you just kind of have to take it one layer at a time and see what you're left with. And also, it just starts by doing outreach. Obviously, there's a little end montage of all the people who wouldn't speak to us.
Yeah.
But luckily, we did have a lot of people that would speak to us, and they kind of form the backbone of the story itself.
And
As you
those
mentioned.
people that we don't see on camera, though, were you getting a lot of people speaking off the record as a source to tell you about what was happening, let's say in the nightclubs or whatever, with different aspects of your story?
We definitely had people who would only speak to us off camera.
Yeah.
And, that can be helpful to kind of flesh out our conception of what happened in various settings. But at the same time, documentary is a visual medium. So it's hard for me to really utilize that, especially because so much of the information I had was coming directly from the journalists who covered the story and who could kind of relay to me the layers of complexity and the layers of people they spoke to.
Mm.
Um, but it never ceased to boggle my mind, the little tidbits out here from various people, whether it's in Hollywood, whether it's in the nightclub scene, whether it's in the government sphere of things in America or Malaysia. Um, the level of influence that Jolo and his conspirators were able to purchase, really, it boggles the mind.